Hello everyone and welcome to a Daggerheart character build. This is for the open beta. I'm building it on the 1.4 playtest system. We're going to be working through a warrior today. I'm going to do a little bit different format. We're going to go back and forth with the character builder. So if you guys like this format better, let me know. If you don't like it as much as just going with the slide presentation, let me know. And I'll keep trying to make this better for the viewers as we go forward. So I'm going to call this a Retribution Warrior. That's going to be our trademark skill for most of the game. We're going to take a hit with this warrior and deal damage on off turns. So there's going to be less focus on evasion. We actually want to get hit. So either way is fine, right? If we have a middle of the road evasion and the characters attack us and miss, we don't mind that. If we get hit, we can deal damage back to them, and we don't mind that either. So hits or misses are fine, and in that way we don't have to have so much focus on evasion. Warriors by class, if you look at the pre-selected skills, they're an agility-based class, and we are not going to be taking agility as our main stat. And that has more to do with weapons than whether or not agility is a good skill. There's a lot of agility-based weapons in the game. There's some pretty good ones. But some of the best agility-based weapons actually deal magical damage, and there is something in the rules that says that you can't use a magic damage weapon unless you have the spellcast trait, and warriors lack the spellcast trait. So that means that we're kind of stuck with physical damage weapons, and the agility weapons for physical damage just aren't as impressive as we'd like them to be. We're really looking for something with either a D10 or D12 die. So there's no D10 dice in the base level agility weapon selections anymore. It's all D8 or lower. So that means that we might as well go with strength. We can grab a Warhammer, which is a D12 weapon, and that's going to help us with the amount of damage that we're doing, especially in the early game. We could change focus later on, but we're really looking to optimize the damage. So this will actually be a strength main stat character. We're going to pay less attention to agility than you would think for a warrior. But there's not so much stuff in warrior that's hinged strictly upon agility. So from what I'm looking at, it's not too big of a setback to take strength. So the build goals here are going to be to deal damage while soaking damage. That makes us a bruiser type character if you've played video games or other role-playing games. The idea of a bruiser is pretty simple. You go in, you don't mind taking a hit, and you deal lots of damage. That's what we're going to be doing. Being interesting out of combat, I think in any role-playing game, you want to think about what you're doing when you're in combat, but you also want to be able to have the character be useful outside of combat. Rogues are a good example of this. They're not the highest damage dealers in combat, but out of combat, they're scouting, they're picking locks, they're dealing with traps, they're doing all kinds of stuff. So there's constant interaction with your character, constant development of their personality, and that feels better than sometimes having a strength-based fighter or barbarian type character where you're one of the best damage dealers for putting out consistent damage in combat. You go in there, you do your job, you shred things up, and then out of combat, you're just kind of this big burly character who's waiting for something else to happen. Strength is often not use that all the time in out of combat stuff. Yeah, you can lift things or knock down a door, pick up a gate or something like that. But in a lot of social settings and a lot of scouting and things like that, the big strong guy is kind of just left on the side waiting for something to do. So in this case, we're actually going to invest in knowledge as our secondary skill. There's a lot of classes and characters where it feels like knowledge is the skill that you kind of dump because you want presence or you want agility, you want strength, you want a bunch of these other stats. Finesse is good for hiding. Knowledge is kind of the one that seems to drop to the bottom of the barrel. There is a build and a reason why we might take knowledge on a warrior. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to build it with knowledge as a secondary. You could also build it with agility as a secondary very easily. But we're going to try to do this so that we have some kind of out-of-combat impact as well as in combat. In the video for 1.4, Matt Mercer mentioned briefly that half races might be a thing. Every ancestry now has two distinct separate entries, and he implied that If they did half races, you could take one entry from one character, another entry from another ancestry, I guess I should say, and mix those two together and have a half race. So just to make a point of what we could do, if we wanted better reach with our weapons, we could be half giant. If we want wings just to fly around, we could be half fairy. Now, having flight with a melee character is really strong. In D&D, you can find yourself in a situation where you've got, a barbarian with tons of damage. Maybe you have some kind of magical effect. The enemy dispels it, grounds you, and then you're just kind of sitting there stuck. Like you can't get to a flying enemy, and you're throwing javelins or something. It just really feels bad. So for the purposes of getting your hammer onto a target, having wings seems to be one of the most impactful half races that you could pick. I like giant, especially in the early game, that extra reach, getting yourself into a combat where you can reach targets outside of melee range is nice. For the skills that we're going to be picking with warrior, though, beware, a lot of them do say it specifically has to be an enemy within melee range. So even the extra reach on giant isn't going to change the fact that the domain card says specifically it has to be in melee range. While giant says your weapon has range very close, it doesn't say that your melee range includes very close. So just as I read the wording, something that says you have to be in melee to activate it still means that. So it'll help us with whirlwinds and some other things early on. Later on, it's not that big of a deal. So if you wanted to do something else, efficient from Clank is insanely good. Elf, the ability to take a third downtime action is really good. So there's a bunch of different ancestries that we could use. We'll talk about that more here in a minute. The personality for this character, we're going to build it as a half giant, half fae. So part of noble family in the Feywild. Zev's parents were loyal to a virtuous ruler, so there's kind of a king or somebody who rules the area that they're in, and they're perceived to be, just and good. And this family is, noble followers. And the king gets killed under some mysterious circumstances. So this family organizes a resistance against the person who they consider to be the usurper. But turns out that it was all a plot by the king to uncover his foes, and they almost ruined the whole plot in trying to overthrow the usurper. So it's a big misunderstanding, and they're really embarrassed about it, and there's nothing they can do but just leave. They go into exile, and they have a daughter, and they raise her outside the Fey realm. So Zev is crossed between some kind of fey creature and a giant spider. She's a bit taller than an average human, but has these really long, spidery arms and legs, and very colorful wings. The long arms give her reach. Again, I like to reskin stuff for role-playing, so having a long reach doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have giant's blood. I just say, hey, there's a reason why this character has this skill. So hey, she's a spidery kind of creature with long arms. Warriors can ignore the burden of a weapon, so they can use two-handed weapons in one hand. So maybe even this Zev has multiple limbs like a spider, and she can actually wield the warhammer two-handed because she's got more than one hand on each side. So there's different role-playing things you could do with this character. That's how we intend to role-play it. If we ever play this character at my table, she'll be a spidery creature with extra arms, and that'll lean into a lot of the abilities. So this particular character, in terms of her personality, has a lot of insatiable curiosity, and she loves to find things and hunt them down. Not always kill them, but that's part of it sometimes. So she's a great hunter. She fights as a counter striker, and anybody who's a fan of MMA fighting or anything like that knows that some fighters are really good at reading their opponents. They wait for them to come in, and they counter strike, and that's what this character is going to be doing a lot. And we're carrying a big warhammer, so that's going to be a theme that we're going to work with. So level 1 gameplay. Let's go in and take a look at the build and start working through this on the builder. So we've just named this Ret Warrior for the purposes of the build, and we've chosen the Warrior class. Now you have Call of the Slayer, and this allows you to, if you fail with fear, you can gain a hope. And then once prolonged rest, you can clear 2 stress and gain 2 hope when role-playing against a big enemy. Call of the Slayer, when you gain a hope, you put a d6 onto this. This lets you stack up d6s, and basically what you want to do is eventually roll a crit and do insane damage when you cash in all your d6s. But we're not going to do that. We're going to do Call of the Brave. We'll take Strength and Agility. We'll also take Knowledge as one of the +1 stats, and we'll dump Instinct. We're not very aware of our surroundings. We're just going to rely on stalking in and getting things done. We're going to take a Warhammer for the main hand weapon, and again, since warriors don't have to worry about burden, it's a 2-handed weapon, but we can still put something in the offhand. I like a small dagger here. It adds to the main hand damage. And any weapon that adds to main hand damage is what we're going to want with this particular character because of the way it plays. When we're doing a retaliation strike, it only gets half of your proficiency dice, but it gets half the proficiency dice, and you still get your damage bonus on top of that. So if we can add more damage to our main hand weapon, all of that plus damage is going to make our retaliation strikes hit a lot harder. I like that better than a shield. They changed shields. It doesn't show up, or at least it didn't a couple days ago when I was working on this in the character builder here. It still showed +2 for the shield, but it looked like their intent is to have round shield be +1 and the tower shield be +3 at the base level. I'm not willing to give up all the stuff that you have to give up for a tower shield, so I prefer to add damage with the offhand. Armor, they've changed armor as well. The base level is now Gambeson armor, which is basically the padded shirt that you wear underneath armor, and that does give an evasion back. At lower levels, we're going to want more armor. We're going to have to take hits to trigger our retaliation, so we're going to want chainmail armor here. It'll give us a loss of evasion of 1 point, but for 6 armor, it's worth it. As you level up and you get higher level armor, the added bonuses to armor are pretty flat. So at the highest level, I think Gambeson armor adds another +6 to the armor, and chainmail would also add another +6. So you could have +12 for chainmail, or you could have +8 for Gambeson. So later on in the build, having lighter armor, you would, let's say, go from chainmail. When you get improved, you would go to leather. Advanced, you might go already to the Gambeson. So you can lighten up the armor as you level up, and that's basically what we're going to do here. We're going to start with the chainmail. It'll lose a point of evasion, but remember, we don't mind too much losing the point of evasion because we do want to get hit sometimes to trigger our retaliation. Here you can take whatever you want. We're going to take a health potion and a sharpening stone, and here's retaliation. That's our trademark thing. This allows us to use a stress to counterattack, and we're going to have that in our build for the whole entire build. Nimble is probably the premier thing that most people would pick here. We're not going too much into agility, so we're going to stay away from that. Deft maneuvers is another stress sink, but we're already going to be using a lot of stress with retaliation, so we can't really afford these skills that cost stress. Not good enough allows you to reroll 1s and 2s. If you have a d6 or d8 weapon, that's worth it, but on the bigger dice, it's not that great. When I say that, there are some weapons that, let's say for instance, you roll a bunch of d8s, and if you roll an 8, you get to keep rolling. So those weapons usually have a d6 or d8 die. I think there's one of the forms for Druid that also does that. And that could be a really great skill for something like that, where it's a smaller die, you re-roll the 1s and 2s, it gives you more chances to get your 6 and trigger a re-roll and keep rolling and stacking damage. But overall, the amount of times that you're going to roll a 1 or 2 on a d12 and improve that by re-rolling it is minimum, because again, we're relying on the plus damage. Warriors get +1 damage for every level that they have, so if you're already adding a +10, by the end of the build, we're going to be adding like +27 damage as flat damage adder to the damage that we do. So re-rolling a 1 or 2 becomes less and less important, and the other skills that we're going to pick up later on eclipse that in the power. In terms of ancestry, there are so many good ancestries now. It really, you could pick a lot of different things. Clank is so good now. They have the Efficient, which lets them do a long rest action on a short rest, and they get +1 bonus to one of their skills. Demons have that thing that lets them not generate fear. With a warrior, we're going to be using all kinds of stress, so we don't really want that. Dwarf lets you reduce a big hit by spending, it's a lot of hope though, it's 3 hope. And then thick skin, your minor threshold increases with your proficiency. We do plan to max proficiency so we can get another +6 to our minor threshold. If we were going to go heavy armor, like really a lot of armor and use a shield, dwarf would make sense, because then we could, start pushing the damage below the minor threshold. If I was playing a dwarf version of this character, I would take the tower shield and maybe even heavy plate armor and just maximize that and try to push damage below the minimum threshold. Elves get an extra rest action that allows us to work on removing stress, healing hit points, and clearing armor slots, all for each rest we do. Fairies, the wings are pretty fantastic. In Furbolg is okay, but for this particular build, I don't think it adds enough. The protection shell for Galapa, giving us extra armor with proficiency, would be nice. Again, it'd be a fine pick if you wanted to do that. Orcs, it's not too bad. I like the old orc better. I think the new version of the orc is less awesome. But using that armor slot and not having to mark it is pretty good, so sturdy could be something that we would want to take. But at the end of the day, we do like the wings on the fairy, and we do really benefit a lot from the reach as a giant. And like I said, there's a way that eventually we could make it so that really doesn't matter, but for the purposes of this build, we have to make a choice. And in the character builder, we can only pick one. We can't multi-class yet. So we are going to go up here and pick the giant for the reach, and that'll be what we use for the purpose of this build. All right, so let's select that. Fairy wings, again, we can't make the half races in here yet. And if you can only pick one thing, sure, pick a giant. If you wanted to pick a fairy, a clank, any of that stuff could be good. Orderborn, I still think, is one of the best communities. Orderborn and Seaborn are kind of standout communities right now because they affect the statistics of the game a lot more. These other, like Underborn, gives you out-of-combat role-playing stuff. If we wanted to play one of those classes to give more out-of-combat stuff, we could. But here we're going to pick Orderborn, and we're going to pick things that might give us hope on a d20 roll. So we're going to say never surrender, never tolerate disrespect, and basically, maybe use a d20 on a if an enemy hurts us and we smack them back, don't disrespect me, and never let the enemy get the advantage. You can pick what you want for the Orderborn stuff. On experiences, we're going to call one of our experiences a smashing success. We're planning to use a hammer, so basically smashing things would be successful. Then we're going to pick something called street smarts. And again, if you knew you were going to be in a forest environment, you'd pick forest smarts instead of street smarts. When you go into your character sheet, don't forget to click on the equipment tab and actually equip the equipment. You can see our evasion dropped to 9. We've got 6 armor. We've got our strength at 2. We do lose an agility point because of the Warhammer, but you can see kind of what that looks like at first level. Let's take a break there and go back and just talk about like the early gameplay. So at level 1, what we're going to do, walk forward in combat. If we get hit, we're going to use our armor to reduce the damage. Try to take 1 hit point whenever we can. Then we're going to use a stress, get retaliation, and do free damage. This is going to be the trademark move for this character. It only gives you half proficiency, but even at level 1, half rounded up is 1, so it gives you a proficiency dice and your extra damage. It's often going to be 2 hit points of damage at this level just because we're getting a bunch of bonuses. If we go back and look, I think already at level 1, we have something like a +6, maybe even a +7 to our damage. So D12 plus 6 is going to often be over these enemies' major threshold and do 2 hit points of damage for the cost of 1 stress. Now remember, the big reason we want to do this on the enemy's turn is because we're not putting down an action token. The ability to deal damage to an enemy without contributing an action token to the tracker. And so far, these reaction abilities like this, I haven't seen anything that says you can only do 1 per turn. Maybe that's in the rules somewhere, and if you guys can point that out to me, I would appreciate it. But it looks like you can take more than 1 reaction per turn, and getting damage done to the enemy without putting a token on the tracker is really a big deal. We're going to maximize the bonus to damage. And as a giant with reach, remember that our whirlwind can target everything within range of our weapon. And very close is actually quite a lot of range. So you can walk up to one character in melee and swing and do damage with whirlwind to a lot of things around it. Whirlwind uses hope, and your retaliation uses stress. So at level 1, you've got somewhere to spend your hope. You've got somewhere to spend your stress. You can trigger experiences, use hope there. You could help other characters, use hope there. But there's lots of different ways to use your hope and stress. Out of combat, we're going to go with that Street Smarts, and again, rename that experience depending on where your campaign takes place. If you're going to be in and out of a city, a lot of adventures that I've been on, we have a home city, and you go out, you adventure, and at some point you return back to the city. So Street Smarts would give my character just, kind of some kind of wisdom, or let's say some kind of, Street Smarts, knowledge about how the city works. And you could use that experience to add to knowledge rolls. That's what we want to do, right? We want to be able to use knowledge, use a hope, trigger our skill, and get good rolls and help figure things out about the town, where we buy certain things, where we might find, like who might have a weapon for sale if somebody in the party wants a specific weapon and the GM says, well, you have to find somebody that sells it. You got the Street Smarts to know who might know that or be able to track it down. So there's some logic to why we might want that. And it's something that I don't think a lot of other characters in the party might go for. So it's a way for us to be useful out of combat with a very specific idea. Orderborn, I would say at lower level, level 1, just use it. Go into combat, make your first swing, trigger your Orderborn, use that D20, try to generate some extra hope, get a hit right away. Remember, Retaliation does not require a hit roll. You don't roll any dice. You don't have the opportunity to generate hope or fear. You simply do damage. Pretty awesome. And then I would say also use your personality for out-of-combat play. So just be who you are and make that something that you do out of combat. I like the idea of being a bodyguard. So let's say there's somebody in your group that has a lot of presence, or somebody who might be an outcast otherwise, and you buddy up with them and you're their bodyguard, and you're protecting them while they do their out-of-combat stuff. It gives you a lot of role-play opportunities. So something like that, using this character's curiosity and personality. All right, so level up options. At level 2, we're going to take traits, and we're going to hit evasion. Soldier's Bond is really good. It allows you to generate a bunch of extra hope right at the start of the day. It's pretty much all it does once a day, but you start the day with a bunch of extra hope. Ferocity is okay. Strategic Approach is really fantastic skill, and we'll talk about that later, but I think there is a way to build a warrior with Strategic Approach that does really good things. I think if you had some demons in your party or something like that could take advantage of it, it would be an interesting way to play, where you just try to stop the GM from getting fear, you stop the GM from getting action tokens, and this character has knowledge and could easily, go into that build, but we're not going to do that for this build. We are going to take that Soldier's Bond. Okay, level 3, we're going to increase our experiences, and we're going to add another stress slot. We'll take our 2 basic experiences up, and at level 3 we could get Scramble. Brace is interesting. Tactician is okay. I really don't like Tactician that much. When you use the help action, other people can add an experience of yours. It can be good in certain situations, but applying our experiences to other people's roles for this particular character doesn't seem that great. And again, typically, the way I understand it, you would want your experience to be relevant and for that person to be able to explain how you helping them with your experience is going to help. So if I assist somebody in combat and I use smashing success, well, okay, if I'm smashing them with a hammer to help my ally, maybe there's a role-playing explanation for that. But it seems kind of clunky on this character. Versatile fighter is okay. When dealing damage, you can mark a stress to deal the maximum on one of your damage dies. It's good, but we're going to be marking a lot of stress anyway. So at this level, let's see if we can back this up just a tiny bit. Yeah, so we're going to take brace at this level, and brace is just going to allow us to run away from one big hit every now and then. We eventually won't use brace much, but it could be a saver, lifesaver at lower levels. We're going to increase traits and add another hit point. And the traits we're going to increase are going to be that knowledge and finesse. Here we got redirect. Redirect is another one of those, if you successfully evade and you roll a 6, you can get that to target another character. It's pretty good. Fortified armor, we need to be able to use our armor with this character because we're getting hit. So getting the extra armor is nice. Deadly focus allows you to get an extra proficiency, and when you have an even numbered proficiency, that extra proficiency would round up for retaliation. So that could be a really good skill. Boost is awesome. I love boost. But again, we're going to be using stress so much on this character that I don't think we can afford the stress to use boost. So we're going to take fortified armor. That gives us a +2 to our armor and allows us to use armor once for free per short rest. So it's like an extra armor slot that doesn't have to be regenerated, which is pretty nice. Gameplay at levels 2 to 4. Scramble is going to let us avoid a 3 hit point attack when necessary. Soldier's Bond is going to allow us to start the day with a whole bunch of extra hope. Boost is tempting, but again, it's just too much stress in the build. Or if there's not stress in the build, it means we're not retaliating and we're not doing what we're supposed to. So the gimmick is this, right? You have to be able to move up to a character, lock it down, and then you use retaliate when they hit you. If they don't hit you, if they try to leave, you have the attack of opportunity on Warrior that's going to allow you to trigger that and do an attack to him on the way out. Now that does trigger an attack roll and you hit or miss. If you want to do damage to them, you could also hold them in place. You can also follow them if you get a successful roll. But basically, we're going to use that attack of opportunity to discourage them from walking away from us. If they do, I would just take the damage in most cases. If I think they're going to go for a caster that's on their last hit point or something like that, sure, I'm going to use the you can't move ability. But mostly I would just do the damage and try to get them, because the being dead condition is, the lowest damage condition in the game. If the target's not able to take an action, then they can't do damage to us. At levels 2 to 4, we're going to be in this range of 2d12 plus 11. And again, that's where you would be for improved weapons on average for this. I think you get up to plus 13 by the time you get to 4th level. But let's say 2d12 plus 11, you can kind of get a feeling for the extra damage that you get off your main hand weapon, adding extra damage to that with your offhand weapon, and then +1 for each level of warrior. So it's big damage, right? You get 22 average per hit. And on retribution, when you retaliate, you're still doing 18 damage on average with half proficiency. So it's only 1d12, but that plus 11 damage is massive. So that's why we want to really stack up all those damage bonuses so that when we retaliate, we're not really worried about rolling the proficiency dice. We need a d12 to try to optimize the amount of damage we can get out of that. And again, we want to, as often as possible, still clear that 2 damage per hit threshold. We don't get retaliate on misses, but we're still going to work on evasion, because if they miss, we're fine. If they hit, we're fine. Out of combat, we got an oversized spider fairy. Roleplay might not always be easy. Again, be a friend or a bodyguard to somebody else, and use hope to help people. Use your knowledge rolls with experience. All right, here we're going to increase our traits right away at level 5. And we're going to take strength and knowledge here. You see me hovering agility. I kind of want to take agility. But at the end of the day, let's just keep the knowledge going up and make strength and agility our main things that we do. Hero Strike, this is clear a hit point, clear a marked stress, or clear 1 hit point when you get a critical hit. This can be pretty nice, but again, since it's going to take up a slot in order to be active when you need it, it's something that we're going to have to pass on. Know thy enemy, make an instinct roll. We don't really have the instinct to run that. Prowess says when you pick this card, permanently add stress slot, a hit point slot, or raise your minor damage threshold, and then this card goes permanently into the vault. And then our last option is signature move. And this is it goes with the theme of our character, right? Rolling a d20 for hope. So we could use a signature move, role play it, talk about how we're doing it, and roll a d20 instead of a d12 as the hope die. That could fit with the build, so if you want to take that, feel free to take it. But I'm going to take prowess here. Again, there's so much stuff that we want in this character that needs to be active in order to be able to trigger it when it happens, that at the end of the day, we just can't afford to keep buying more stuff that's good when you put it out. So in this case, prowess, we'll take the extra hit point slot, the extra stress slot. Not really too worried about my damage threshold, but you could take that if you thought that was better. At level 6, we're going to add evasion and I think the experiences. So we'll level up the same experiences again, get our evasion up by a point. Here we have battle hardened, rage up. Rage up, I'm not a big fan of rage up. I think it's too much cost for what it gives. Rapid riposte, if they miss us in melee, we can make a counterattack. Recovery is low-key broken. So at this point, I'm going to take the retaliation skill, right? We'll take recovery later in this build, but right now rapid riposte is going to give us the option to attack out of turn when they miss us. So retaliate says if they hit us, we can counterattack. And now if they hit us, we counterattack. If they miss us, we counterattack. As long as we're in melee with them, it's a no-win situation for our opponents. All right, then at level 7, we're going to add 2 more stress slots. This character is going to be burning through a lot of stress. We get recovery here. These skills, the bone touched and blade touched, are really good. All this stuff is really good, but I just want the recovery. It's going to allow me to clear my stress every time we go into a short rest and completely clear it, right? So we get a long rest version of that. We can stack stress. We just got 2 more stress slots. We can fill that thing up, and every short rest, we're going to empty it back out. And that's pretty good. Levels 5 through 7. I didn't build it in this build. I think the most powerful thing you could do with this character, potentially at level 5, go straight into Divine Wielder with the Seraph Multiclass. It gives you a second target for an added stress, so on your turn you can often multi-target things. On off turns you can still hit them with your hammer for tons of damage. The Divine Wielder option really gives you a lot, and being a Seraph also gives you a bunch of extra dice that you can roll. We're a strength-based character anyway, so we're going to maximize the amount of dice that we get to add hope. So we get tons of extra hope that we can use on ourselves all throughout the party for the whole day. We get extra weapon tricks that we can do. And this build isn't using the subclass upgrades. I think they're pretty weak compared to other stuff that we could get anyway. But multi-classing into Seraph would be a strong move. The reason I'm not doing it on this character is just because the way that I'm planning to play it. if we do play it at my table, this character is going to be played by my daughter, and making things a little bit linear is easier for her to play. And yeah, so maybe Divine Wielder would be better. So that's something that you could take a look at. Critical Role said in the 1.4 update that they need more feedback on the 4 to 8 levels. People are doing low level stuff. They're doing a lot of like high level maxed out stuff. But these levels in the middle, like 4 to 8, they don't have as much good feedback on how the characters play in that range. So if you wanted to play a level 5 one-shot, man, this character multi-classing into Seraph at level 5 would be a really strong character. And levels 5 to 7, I feel like, are a really good power range for this character. They would be really already in the strong range. They don't have to wait until the final tiers to be good. So if you're doing one-shots in that 4 to 8 range, I think this character is good, either as a straight warrior like I'll build it, or with a Seraph multi-class. For the first of this build, we're sticking with warrior. I'm going to optimize. At every tier, we have to do stats, we have to do proficiency, evasion, and experience. That's already 4 out of 6 options that we've got picked. So we can, do the multi-class, but if we go straight class, we get those extra stress slots. And again, we want the ability to max out the stress slots. So I think there's a reason to stay straight warrior and just maximize the stress slots. And that gives us 6 things every tier. We need all 6. We need the stat, the proficiency, evasion, experience, and 2 stress slots. Recovery is a really strong skill. Being able to fully recover stress on this character is key. If you're a clank, you have efficiency. It already allows you to take a long rest based action every short rest, so you could be clearing your stress with clank efficiency. If you had recovery, you could fully recover your stress and also fully recover your armor or hit points. So I think a clank with recovery would be really good, or an elf with recovery where you could do all of your stress and then do a short rest on both your armor and hit points. So there's different ways to play. I will say I would not play this character without one of those tricks. If you said, well, I want to be flying and I want to do, a different skill, and I don't want to do recovery, and I don't want to do efficiency, and I don't want to do an elf, you got to do one of them. You got to do something. If your dungeon master is giving you challenging combats at all, and there's more than one of them a day, this character has to be able to fully recover stress on a short rest in some way, shape, or form, or at least with an elf, you could do stress 3 times, right? They clarified that you could do multiple instances of the same action. So if you really need to clear your stress out, once you get a bunch of stress slots, you could do 2 or even 3 stress clears with an elf. But I wouldn't play this character without it, because you really have to be able to use that stress. That's what's going to make this character powerful. So in levels 5 through 7, if they hit us, we hit back. If they miss us, we hit back. If they try to leave and go attack somebody else, we hit back. The ability to do damage off turn is what this character keys on. That's what we're all about. Damage at 5 through 7, we're at 4d12 plus 16 on average in these levels 5 through 7. That gives us 38 damage, or 27 on a retaliation. You can see now that we're getting more damage dice. The extra damage that we get, the bonus plus 16, is really a big chunk of the damage we're doing on those retaliation hits. You can see that the regular hits are starting to kind of take off and get ahead, but we're still doing really good damage with 2d12 plus 16. Hope is now going to be used with our skills to ensure hits at this mid-tier. Things start getting higher armor class, and we want to be able to use smashing success to get those hits on our turn, make sure we sink them. Remember, if you fail with fear, the GM still gets the choice to take the fear of the turn, but with a warrior, when you fail with fear, you can take a hope. So remember to do that. Orderborn gets you a d20, makes it much more likely that you're going to generate hope. You got the warrior features. Make sure you're playing all that stuff on this character if you're doing these level 5 to 7 one-shots. Okay, let's get back into the Character build 8 through 10. At level 8, we're going to make another experience. Here we're just going to call it Juggernaut and maybe use that when we try to break a restrained or something like that. We'll take traits for strength and knowledge, and again we'll take that extra proficiency. So traits and proficiency at level 8 is the statistically best way to play. Breaking Blow uses a stress. Battle Cry is the best that we have for the moment. And that's something that if we can fully clear our stress every short rest, it might not be as good as we think going into combat. But it does help clear for other characters, everybody that can hear us. So that's, that's pretty good. All right, here we're going to increase our experiences and evasion once again. And for level 9 domain cards, we have On the Brink. We have Reaper Strike, which is a ton of hope, but it's big damage. We've got Splintering Strike, Gore, and Glory. Whenever you deal enough weapon damage to defeat an enemy, gain a hope or clear a stress. So while we're in combat, this is fantastic. If somebody hits us in melee, we retaliate, and if that's enough to kill them, we get that stress right back. So this character's up and running in a pretty big way. Level 10, we're just going to take 2 more stress slots. And then we look at Battle Monster, Death Run. These are pretty powerful skills. Onslaught is good. Now this says we always do 2 hit points of damage, but we're pretty much always going to be doing 2 hit points anyway. But what we want is the second part. In addition, whenever an enemy within weapon range, now this one doesn't say melee, right? This doesn't say when something happens within melee range. It says whenever an enemy within weapon range. And this is part of the reason why we want the giant now, because everything within very close is still considered within weapon range. If they deal damage to an ally with an attack that doesn't include you, mark a stress and immediately deal weapon damage at half proficiency. So now we've got everything, right? If they miss us, we hit them back. If they hit us, we hit them back. If they hit somebody else that's close to us, we hit them back. If they try to leave, we have attack of opportunity. So we're really rounding this out now with everything. So we can go in here into the loadout. Retaliation we're going to want to keep. Soldier's Bond, basically we would have that, and we would be able to swap out for another skill that costs 0. So we've got a couple of these skills that we want in our loadout that cost 0 stress to bring out of the vault. So you start with Soldier's Bond in the morning, and then you swap that out, and you would have Onslaught, Rapid Riposte, Retaliation, and potentially Battle Cry. We could look at something else for that Battle Cry. And Fortified Armor, of course, we want to keep in all the time. And here we've got Gore and Glory. So we've got all of the good stuff that we want. And you're never going to want to max out your stress, right? You don't want to get stressed out with your last stress marked. With this character, we've got so many stress points by level 10 that I would say even leave your last 2 unmarked. And recovery is 1 stress to bring back in. So I would leave that out of the daily running build. And whenever you're ready to take a short rest, you swap in recovery, mark 1 stress. You're always planning to fully recover your stress anyway. So it doesn't matter, right? If we've got 7 stress marked and we mark the 8th one, for us it doesn't matter because we've got that recovery skill and we're going to fully recover stress even on a short rest. So that's the idea. And that would be our running loadout. Then the Fortified Armor is giving us 2 to our armor. And we can go in here and look at what the build is going to look like with maximized weapons. So we put in a legendary Warhammer, a legendary small dagger, and a legendary Gambeson armor. And we put those up. And the Gambeson armor is +6. And with the extra domain card, it goes up to 8. So we have 8 armor. And at this level, I mean, you're getting hit for like 30 points of damage. And, we might even have to mark multiple armor slots to get it below our major threshold. We haven't had a chance to work on our major threshold that much. So at the highest levels, a lot of times when we take damage, we'll be taking 2. We've sneaked in a few extra hit point slots as we went along with the build. so we can afford to take a few hits here and there. You could take just straight giant. This build has 9 hit point slots instead of 8 because, you know, giant gave us an extra one all the way back at character creation, so you can do that if you're a straight giant. But yeah, so we have 14 evasion, 8 armor. We'll get missed sometimes. A lot of monsters at this level only have like +3 to +5 to hit, so they'll still be missing us like 50% of the time, and we'll get that retaliation. If they hit us, we'll get retaliation, and if they attack somebody else. And you can see on the damage in the middle there, our legendary warhammers doing 6d12 plus 27. So those hits have all stacked up. 10 of that is, you know, 10 levels of warrior equals 10 damage. So even without the warrior levels, we're still at 6d12 plus 17. But that extra 10 damage really puts this build over the top and makes it so that a lot of times we would be getting 3 hit point hits at level 8 through 10. So primary role, again, at the highest level, we're still a bruiser. We retaliate on hit, on miss, or when they attack anybody else, or when they try to leave our square. Damage is 6d12 plus 27 at the highest level. That's 60 damage per hit, and it's enough for 3 hit points on a lot of targets. And our retaliation hits at half proficiency are still 45. That plus 27 is just massive, right? Coming through massive. So that's still going to be 2 hit points on a lot of enemies. And getting 2 hit points for free for the cost of 1 stress on a character with like 11 stress slots, 10 stress slots. We could be doing that a lot. The Seraph Multiclass is crazy damage, but it's limited by the domain wording. Just remember, if you do take the Seraph Multiclass and you go into Divine Wielder, it gives your weapon added range, but a lot of the domain cards say specifically target within melee range for the retaliation. So it doesn't really matter if you've got a bigger weapon range with giant. Doesn't really matter if you get the extended weapon range with the Seraph Divine Wielder. It does allow you to target multiple targets. So on your turn, when you take a hit, you can mark a stress, hit 2 things. Divine Wielder is really good. It really allows you to dish out, well, twice the damage on your turn. But with Straight Warrior, you get more stress slots, so you get to work through that better, I think. Generates a lot of hope. Now remember, you're generating a lot of the stuff that you do, you're getting a d20 on your hope dice. When you kill something, you potentially get a hope back. When you fail with fear, you get a hope die. So this character can generate a ton of help. Even with the changes to advantage and all that, it really... You're going to generate, I think, more hope than you can use with the skills that you have, because we don't really have... once Whirlwind kind of goes out of the build, we don't have a place to put our hope except using our experiences and helping our allies. Whirlwind falls out pretty quickly, so you can keep that through about level 6 or 7, and once those bigger skills start kicking in where we get the retaliation, Whirlwind kind of falls off. If your particular GM runs a lot of combats with multiple characters, Whirlwind would stay in. Or you can always swap it in. It takes a full action now to swap it in during combat, but if you were tracking, somebody in your party is tracking, and there's a bunch of orcs up ahead or something like that, you'll know that you need it. So in summary, warriors really live up to the damage dealing. They are a really good damage dealer. I still think sorcerers are probably the best damage dealer in the game. The Bard Seraph build deals sickening amounts of damage and is a support class on top of that. So I think the thing that sets warrior apart from other classes that can do damage is that you smother your target, right? You get right on top of them. If they hit you, they get punished. If they try to leave, they get punished. It doesn't matter what they do. Once you're standing on top of them, you're going to be able to use your skills in some way. So I think that's what sets this character apart. And again, if you just wanted to build a warrior Seraph multiclass and just do damage, you'd be like the other damage dealers, but with the ability to be able to pin things down. We're not that great at soaking damage at high levels. We do have moderate evasion. We paid attention to it. We got some evasion. We switched over to Gambeson armor at the end to get more evasion. But yeah, we don't want to have to be triggering the armor a lot. So the idea here is to finish combat before it gets too dangerous, right? And then use the rest mechanics to clear all of our stress and still be able to heal our hit points. Or if we have a ton of hit point damage, then use the recovery skill at rest to recover your hit points, whichever makes the most sense. Maximizing our damage die is important with this build. We need those D12s. So strength is generally going to be better than agility. It takes a long time before we get to rapid riposte, so I think that's the one where you get to counterattack when they miss. So if that skill was sooner than 6, it could really be worth it to pick Nimble. If you're doing a one-shot and you're just dropped into the game at level 6 or higher, then I think you could take a look at the agility first type build. Use a double-edged sword or a chain whip that has quick feature, so you can target multiple targets with that, and using agility as your main stat. So if you're playing at that mid-range and you're playing a straight warrior and you wanted to go with agility instead, you could optimize your evasion, take Nimble, get evasion as high as possible, maybe even play a Simia for that, and just punish every time they miss. And again, with a warrior, if they're up against you in melee combat and they think they're going to miss, the GM's not going to want to target you, but attack of opportunity if they don't. So it's a nice way to make this work. But yeah, you could do an evasion build with this. I like this build better just because it plays levels 1 to 10 smoothly. But if you're doing a one-shot, you could look at evasion and look at that Seraph multiclass. I do think there's a way to use a strategic approach and bone touched and just not give action tokens to the GM. You could build a different kind of warrior that doesn't focus on the retaliation. Use the demon skill that you can, if you roll fear, you can drop 2 stress and get a hope instead. And with this, you could deny fear to the GM on your turn. You could deny action tokens and really limit what the GM can do. In the build we're using, if you're at a bigger party, you don't care if you get extra turns, right? You'll take your turn when it comes around because you can do good damage, but you don't mind when other characters are taking their turns because you have the potential when the GM attacks you to trigger and get your own damage on a retaliation strike. So this character doesn't need to go a lot. In the version with a strategic approach and bone touched, that in a smaller group where you only have like 3 characters in your party, this could be really overpowered, right? Because you'd be taking 1 out of 3 turns and the GM gets nothing on your turn. No action token for him, no fear for him. No matter what you generate, you can just take it away from the GM. So it'd be an interesting way to play. If you had a warrior, a ranger, and a support character, for example, the ranger also has gimmicks that prevent the GM from getting his resources. So you could really just lock down combats at high level and not give action tokens and not give fear to the GM. They get their turn, they have like 2 action tokens on the board. It's not going to be a very impressive turn. They could have a character with like, 3 actions that really wouldn't get to take any actions because they have so few tokens to generate. So it's an idea. It doesn't work for this build, but I think there might be a build around that. All right, so that's talking through warriors. So it's a specific warrior build, but it's also a discussion about what else can work with warrior and what I think is good and bad. I think overall they need to address the magic damage thing. There's only a couple classes in the game. I think guardians and warriors that are not, they don't have a spell cast ability, so they can't use magic damage weapons. And there are quite a few, like the Eagle Blade is really good agility-based weapon, but it's magic damage, so you can't use it unless you have a spellcast trait. So either give these classes their spellcast trait and just call agility a spellcast trait, or allow magic damage weapons to be used by anybody, I think. Anyway, that's my thoughts on it. Hope you enjoyed the warrior build. We're going to close it out there. Please let me know how you like this new format, if you liked it, hated it, whatever, and leave it in the comments down below so I can learn how to do these better. Also, subscribe if you want to see more of these in the future, and hope to see you in the next one.